Hello, everyone. This is day one of part two of our Unit 4 triangles, congruent triangles unit. So today we are going to talk about something that's very useful and very important, and that is corresponding parts of, that should say, congruent triangles. Please correct your packet, are congruent, and that's CPCTC. So what this means is if we know our triangles are congruent. So I said that triangle WIS is congruent to triangle EUP. That means that angle W is congruent to angle E. Angle I is congruent to angle U. Angle S is congruent to angle P. That also means that WI is congruent to EU. IS is congruent to UP, and that WS is congruent to EP. So our conclusion is, if we know the triangles are congruent, we can conclude that any of the corresponding parts are congruent. And I'm sorry if you can hear my cat in the background. She just really wants my attention. So how can we use this? So if we look at this parallelogram here, we know that angle Q is congruent to angle R. So that's a given. Oops, I wrote given there. Angle Q is congruent to angle R, which is given. And we know that PQ is congruent or parallel to RS, not congruent. So that means PQ is parallel to RS. And what we want to try to prove is we want to try to prove that SQ is congruent to PR. Well, if I look at that, those two are both parts of my green triangle here, PRS. And then what I'm going to make be my turquoise triangle, PQS. And actually, that's not the correct order for those triangles, but I want to prove those two triangles are congruent. So looking at my given here, that Q is congruent to R, that's an angle. So in order to get these congruent, I'm looking for one of my four methods. So I can do side, 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 angle, angle, side, angle, or angle, angle, side. Remember, we can never use side, side, angle because that's a bad word that I'd be writing on a math test. So PQ is parallel to RS. There's a transversal there of PS. So if I look at that, I know that angle, because it has to be between my parallel lines and my transversal, so it's angle PSR is congruent to angle QPS. And that's because if I know I have parallel sides, I have alternate interior angles congruent. So that means these two angles are congruent. So now I have two angles, so I really need a side. When I look at that green and the blue, hopefully you notice they share side PS. So since they share side PS, I'm going to say PS is congruent to PS, and that's the reflexive property. And then I can say that triangle RSP is congruent to triangle QPS. And that's because I have angle, angle, side. And then once I know those triangles are congruent, I can say that SQ is congruent to PR by CPCTC. And that's the end of my proof. So there are two more proofs here that I want you to pause and try, and then come back and check your answers. Okay, so when I look at example 2 here, my given is that AE and PD bisect each other. So that means that PR is congruent to RA and ER is congruent to AR. And that's definition of bisect. And it bisects both ways because it says they bisect each other. Then looking at this diagram, I know that angle PRE is congruent to angle DRA because those are vertical angles and vertical angles are always congruent. I now have enough to prove those triangles are congruent. So it's triangle PRE is congruent to triangle DRA by side, angle, side. And therefore, angle P is congruent to angle D, CPCTC. So again, we're going to look at number 3. So I'm going to pause and do it, and you come back. Okay, so this one, again, I stated my givens, and then I looked at my first given, which is IT is perpendicular to GR. So if IT is perpendicular to GR, that means that ITU and ITA are both right angles. So these two angles right here, ITU and ITA, are both right angles. And then I know that those two angles, ITU is congruent to angle ITA because all right angles are congruent. Next, I know that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. So if I look at those in my diagram, those are exterior angles. And that doesn't help me much. But knowing that this is a straight line and this is a straight line, that tells me that angle 1 and IUT are supplementary, and angle 2 and IAT are supplementary because linear pairs are supplementary. Therefore, I know IUT is congruent to IAT because supplements of congruent angles are congruent. IT is congruent to IT because that's reflexive because I need a side and they share the side. So then triangle ITU is congruent to triangle ITA by angle, angle, side. And UI is congruent to IA by CPCTC. So if you have any questions, please bring them to class.